Welcome to the Chris Levels Show, Politics and Prophecy. For the next hour, he will share with you his theme of living life based on principles and not feelings. It's time for a return to our Judeo-Christian roots of laws and repent from the progressive liberal philosophy of what's convenient and feels good at the moment. Join him as he uncovers and exposes the spiritual wickedness that is robbing us of our inheritance that Jesus Christ promised us as a nation if we are obedient to his ways. Here's the host of the show, Chris Levels.
So we want to get back to the topic at hand, and we're going to pick up with today. The homosexual activist movement is a juggernaut, racking up success after success. Even the occasional losses, such as voter rejection of same-sex marriage in the 2004 election, are simply the expected one step back in the time-honored two steps forward, one step back mode of most long-term political wars. After all, by audaciously conducting thousands of illegal same-sex marriage ceremonies, homosexuals all but guaranteed legal and social acceptance of their fallback position, homosexual civil unions with the full legal force of marriage, something most Americans regarded as radical and unacceptable just a few years ago. As just one of a multitude of success indicators, consider that the popular teen magazine 17 conducted a reader poll in 1991 shortly after activist homosexuals abandoned the streets in favor of the television studio. At the time, only 17% of the magazine's adolescent readers accepted homosexuality as appropriate. In 1999, after 8 years of intense gay rights marketing, a whopping 54%, more than 3 times as many teens, accepted homosexuality as appropriate. And I don't know how many of you are parents out there that are listening right now, but I had the privilege to work at a Job Corps in my life, and I noticed that there was probably close to 50% of actual young people from the ages of 16 to 24 that were engaging in homosexualism. As a matter of fact, there would be groups of girls that would take new inductees to the center off on weekends to parties, get them drunk, and so-called initiate them, almost like a prison culture. It was disgusting, but it happened. These children, who most of them are fatherless, most of them from broken homes, were easily susceptible to these kind of influences, and these things happen to them, and they are happening. And it's the same thing in any public school where they are allowing the teaching of homosexuality and encouraging it and its alternative lifestyles. But let me get back to the text. This stunning turnaround is reflected in virtually every area of society, whether in culture, politics, law, business, the news media, entertainment, education, or even the church. Homosexual strides have been nothing short of astonishing. Once condemned as immoral deviants, homosexuals and lesbians today are honored, idealized, defended as victims, and celebrated as role models. Thanks to hate crimes legislation, they are now afforded extra protection as a special class of people. Protection is not granted to all members of society. If you were assaulted, the perpetrator would get one sentence, but if you were assaulted because of your homosexuality, the perpetrator would receive a more severe sentence under hate crime sentencing guidelines. Meanwhile, in what was once a vibrant Judeo-Christian culture, Christians and other proponents of traditional biblical principles are routinely cast as bigots and homophobes thanks to constant jamming. Direct quotes from the Bible regarding homosexuality are routinely condemned as hate speech. And as we have seen, pro-homosexual journalists piously agonize over whether or not they should dignify the traditional biblical viewpoint by even acknowledging it. Multitudes of activists, with almost limitless time and energy to devote to advancing their agenda, largely unencumbered by any need to change diapers, pay for dental braces, or attend their children's soccer games, as do most heterosexual married people, have succeeded in their goal of transforming society. As public relation campaigns go, it's been an unqualified success. However, in the gay rights movement relentless struggle to legitimize homosexuality and the greater society's veneration of them as heroes of the great civil rights crusade of the new millennium, we've forgotten one thing. In the endlessly clever media campaign that's bamboozled everyone, restructured their consciousness, turn their hate into love and their rejection into acceptance, something crucial has been lost. We've forgotten about reality. We've been living in a Madison Avenue fantasy world of marketing images and carefully crafted rhetoric in the foreground, with court battles, fascist-like intimidation, and relentless waves of persuasion in the background. But what about the truth we've left behind? What about the reality of homosexuality, of what causes it, and of what it means physically and spiritually for those so oriented? Do we even care anymore? Let's rewind and go back to former Congressman Robert Bauman, who, in poignantly describing his internal struggles against his homosexual compulsions, confided that he had been sexually seduced when he was 5 years old by an older boy. Did that experience have anything to do with Bauman's future homosexuality? There was a time when psychiatry, psychology, religion, and common sense all said yes. In fact, sexually abused young males are up to 7 times more likely to self-identify as gay or bisexual than peers who had not been abused, concludes a peer-reviewed 1998 study, Sexual Abuse of Boys, by William C. Holmes, M.D., and Gail B. Slapp, M.D. On that topic, a reader recently wrote to me, "We are a family of 8 siblings, and the oldest boy is gay and has lived with the same partner for 41 years. At various times, my siblings and I have tried to discover why he is gay, and none of the rest of us are. We finally found out through an older cousin that my brother was repeatedly sexually molested when he was 6 years old by a 19-year-old man. Even Kirk and Mattson, who advise activists to claim they were born homosexual, know better. We argue that, for all practical purposes, gays should be considered to have been born gay," they write. Even though sexual orientation for most humans seems to be the product of a complex interaction between innate predispositions and environmental factors during childhood and early adolescence. If environmental factors are involved, and everyone knows they are, whether or not they publicly admit it, why then advise homosexuals to claim they were born gay? To suggest in public that homosexuality might be chosen, Kirk and Mattson explain, is to open the can of worms labeled moral choices and sin and give the religious intransigents a stick to beat us with. Straights must be taught that it is as natural for some persons to be homosexual as it is for others to be heterosexual. Wickedness and seduction have nothing to do with it. Unfortunately, with all the brainy marketing behind the campaign to mainstream homosexuality, what's been swept under the rug is the recognition, once commonplace in America, that flawed early relationships or sexual victimization could put a child on the road to homosexuality. Children are exquisitely impressionable, so much so that sexual seduction or assault is a major trauma that can and often does reprogram the victim's identity, his view of who and what he is. While the Holmes and Slapp study confirms this, the point is self-evident. Our prisons are full of child molesters who were molested as children and batterers who were battered as children. What about the 12-year-old who molested Bauman? What caused him to sexually seduce a 5-year-old boy? No doubt he felt a strong compulsion to do to a new kid what had been done to him. But why? An innocent young child has a bright light quality that feels mysteriously threatening to those in the grip of corruption. In fact, many see this dynamic at the core of a great deal of child abuse. To the person who's already been converted and is acting out the homosexual lifestyle, it's deeply satisfying, far beyond mere sexual pleasure, to initiate an innocent person. Doing so serves to anesthetize his own conscience and assuage his inner conflict by destroying the innocence of another person, since that innocence tends to make him aware of his own corruption. There was a time when most Americans knew that homosexuals were not born that way, but rather had their normal gender identity development disturbed and redirected through early childhood experiences. There was a time when we recognized on some level that unhealthy relationships with mothers and fathers could cause girls and boys to grow up with gender confusion, just like emotionally devastating traumatic experiences of molestation, if not dealt with properly. But that was a time before much of America itself was seduced into believing that there was no God, or if there was a God, he is inconsequential to the affairs of the world. It was a time when Judeo-Christian morality inspired the culture and the laws of the land. Today, we've basically abandoned old-fashioned notions of right and wrong in favor of consensuality, which means two people can do whatever they want, no matter how abominable, as long as they don't hurt anybody else. The problem with that, aside from the fact that it denies the existence of God and His laws, is that in such a diluted state, you have no basis for determining if you're hurting another person or not. A pedophile justifies sex with children precisely because he doesn't believe he's hurting the child. Rather, he believes he's loving him. You might wonder, where and when will this gay rights public relations steamroller stop? The end game is not only to bring about the complete acceptance of homosexuality, including same-sex marriage, but also to prohibit and even criminalize public criticism of homosexuality, including the quotation of biblical passages disapproving of homosexuality. In other words, total jamming of criticism with the force of law. This is already essentially the case in Canada and parts of Scandinavia. Why, you might ask? I thought gays just wanted equal rights and to be free to do what they want in their own bedrooms. No, they've had that for years. Their campaign will not end until Christians and other traditionalists opposing homosexuality are shut up, discredited, and utterly silenced, and all because of a little factor we've forgotten about in our cleverness, namely this. In truth, there is something wrong with homosexuality. Simply put, it is unnatural and self-destructive, just as Western civilization has long understood it. Homosexual activists fancy their cause is identical to that of blacks in the 60s civil rights movement. But being black is not unnatural and self-destructive. Being of African origin doesn't involve fleeing one's own conscience and the author of that conscience, God. But it is precisely because of this difference that the gay civil rights movement is not about changing the laws so homosexuals can have equal opportunity for advancement or access as it was for blacks during the 60s. Homosexuals already live in freedom and can reside, work, or play virtually anywhere they want. In fact, as a group, homosexuals enjoy a higher income level than the general American population. It's not about rights. It's about redefining truth and censoring all criticism so that militant homosexuals can be comfortable in their lifestyle without having to be disturbed by reality. Remember, all of us, homosexuals included, have a conscience, that other dimensional standard that God has tucked away inside each of us, that causes us inner conflict when we're doing the wrong thing. But if we tumble into the grip of dark forces we don't understand and then start to defend our obsessions and compulsions, we inevitably come to regard our conscience as an enemy. And although we may be somewhat successful in drowning out that inner warning bell, what happens when this same rejected conscience factor appears in another person and gets too close to us for comfort? We feel threatened. Therefore, we feel compelled to silence the voice of conscience. Not just the one inside of us, but the one in other people, which tends to revive our own conscience, with which we're at war. This means we can't tolerate dissent. We simply can't afford it. It makes us want to scream. To the homosexual living in denial, then even a loving offer of help from, say, a Christian ex-gay minister or reparative therapy counselor to help overcome homosexual addiction feels like the most vile abuse of hatred. In fact, it's real love, which we misinterpret as hatred and bigotry, simply because it causes us to confront a truth that is not welcome in us. When all is said and done, the mainstreaming of homosexuality over the last few decades has been a great tragedy. But of all the societal confusion, chaos, and corruption it has ushered in, the most tragic dimension of all is what it has done to people struggling with homosexual and transgender attractions and compulsions. Remember, our conflicts contain the seeds of redemption. That is, as long as we know we have a problem, there's hope for change. But if we deny there's a problem, we are literally robbed of the chance to find healing. That's exactly what America has done in buying into the gay rights movement. We have betrayed our homosexual brothers and sisters. Glorifying dysfunctionality and corruption, we have relieved homosexuals of the inner conflict they once felt over their condition, something they desperately need. Indeed, all of us need, if we're ever going to overcome our problems and find wholeness. A generation ago, we understood that there is such a thing as sin, and that sin is a serious matter and to be avoided. Now there is no societal consciousness of sin, only limitless freedom, choice, and consensual relationships. Beguiled by our scientific and technological advances into believing we are enlightened, in reality, as we move further and further away from our Judeo-Christian spiritual roots, we actually understand less and less about ourselves. Most of all, we've forgotten as a society what love is, because supporting and justifying homosexuality is not real love any more than glorifying drinking helps the alcoholic or celebrating smoking helps wipe out lung cancer. We defend our own corruption at great peril, and if defending that corruption becomes a national movement, as it has with our cultural and legal adoption of the gay rights agenda, we're all in serious trouble. In truth, most homosexuals experience guilt and conflict when they first discover homosexual urges. Thus, there is a strong temptation, especially in today's pro-gay culture, for them to resolve the conflict by giving in to the compulsion and affirming it's okay to be gay. But if they do, there is just no way out for them. For this reason, the most loving stance for others to take is not to serve as enablers of the self-destructive and immoral compulsions, but to stand in patient but firm opposition. In other words, we need to side with the afflicted person's conscience.